Good afternoon, everyone. As Rob mentioned, I'm Don Bulfin. I'm from Dickinson. You don't need to hear about me, but we'll go quickly through our panelists to introduce themselves, then we'll move on to sort of what we're going to be going through today. So Vincent first.
Okay, so I'm Vincent McCartney, CEO of Corporate Services with Camper and Nicholsons.
Mark Perry, Director of Europe for Centtrip, based in Amsterdam.
Franc Jansen, owner of JMS Yachting.
Thanks all. So as you can see, the title, Modern Yacht Transactions, a very, very wide topic. So we'll try and cover a few bases, starting with the kind of the one-offs, the purchases, bit of refit, and sort of structuring side of things. We will move on to more day-to-day operational elements, and we will touch a little bit on the risks surrounding transactions in modern yachting. One thing that stood out for me when asked to moderate this was, this is probably more than any of the other topics, it's a room where everyone in here experiences transactions every day. We're all dealing in yacht transactions, so I would urge anyone and everyone, share your insight, share your experience, horror stories as well. Most of us here have come across some sort of cock up in our careers, so it's a space I think for us all to share, to actually improve our knowledge of the pitfalls that we can face in our world. So use the Slido, put your hands up. We'd love to hear from you. Just one sort of ground rule before we start. I was reading Franc's profile earlier on his website. He's got a biggest professional gripe section. My one for 2025 is mentions of AI and sustainability. They're used too often, sometimes well, but often not. So if you're going to use the words AI or sustainability today, let's make it, let's add value like the brokers do, and not just use it as a wishy-washy, greenwashing or whatever phrase. So number one, we'll turn to Vincent, I think, initially. Structuring and yacht purchases. So what sort of conversations are you having with your clients at the outset when you're onboarding a client, beginning of a relationship, about their structuring, their financing, their funding? Are they thinking already about how they're going to plan for their operational element? Or take us through that kind of new client process for you.
Yeah, thanks, Dom, for picking me first. The conversations really vary quite dramatically, and they vary based on a number of different drivers. For example, if I have a client referred over to me who wants to set up a structure, to own the yacht, to build a yacht, or whatever the transaction may be, if that referral has come through from a lawyer, it's almost pre-decided before it comes onto my desk. The lawyers in the room will understand when you're speaking with your clients, you're already telling them, you don't want to go to this territory, given your domicile or tax residence, you want to be here. And so the framework's already there. So my job is really easy. To the contrary, when I have our qualified brokers introducing clients, that's also good. But when I have the less experienced brokers who were referring clients over, they may have already had a conversation, and I often say a little bit of knowledge is dangerous. It's better you don't have any, or you don't try and pretend you have a lot of knowledge when you're speaking to clients. We heard from the panel after lunch, the clients that we deal with, they can sniff out someone who doesn't know what they're talking about pretty quickly. And what I see time and time again, which is frustrating, is clients coming to me saying, I've spoken with Fred, our friendly broker, and he's told me if I buy this yacht, I don't have to pay tax, and I don't have to pay VAT, and I don't have to do X, Y, and Z. And I kind of sit there and think, really? Well, that's great. How do you achieve that? And of course, it's not achievable. And so when I'm having conversations with a new yacht owner, someone who isn't seasoned, it's their first yacht, maybe, they're looking to put a smaller budget, 10 million or something like that into it, they're really kind of gullible. And so the conversation with those clients is very different. It starts from the very beginning. Okay, where do you live? Where do you want to use this yacht? What do you want to use it for? Who's going to be on board? Where are you cruising? And so the conversation is completely different. Similarly, I think I've done quite a lot of structures over the last 18 months for new build projects. And I think the difficulty when you're structuring and trying to consider all of the factors for a new build is that you're basing the structure that's going to come into full swing in 3 or 4 years' time on today's information and today's regimes. So again, you need to be agile and be able to flex those structures when we're setting them up today for a yacht that's going to be operating in 3 or 4 years' time. So does that answer the question?
I think it's all valuable content. And sticking with you, Vincent, because again, we will come on to the others, I promise you, but they're a little bit further down there. We're trying to sort of follow a little bit, the life of a yacht here. So I think one thing that I've noticed in practice is, by definition, most of our clients are sophisticated business people. They've been successful. They've made their money, and increasingly we see, their businesses themselves are, sophisticated technological businesses, things like that. And yet we see this gap when they come to their yacht operation and their knowledge around building, setting up for a yacht, starting that journey. We see this huge gap, whether it's in their, we've obviously heard a moment ago about cybersecurity or whatever else it is. There's been criticisms that sort of yachting is a bit unsophisticated compared to, and this actually is something that maybe after you, Vincent, Mark might also be able to step in a bit on this. But is that your experience that we've got these, super successful clients, but actually there's a gap when it comes to their yachts?
Yes, there's definitely a gap, but I'm not sure whether I would state that it's a, I forgot the word you just mentioned, but I think the gap is that the sophistication around yacht ownership is in my view, unlike any other asset class. We're dealing with high net worth and ultra high net worth clients, and those clients are exceptional business people. But most of the assets that they are surrounded by or they interact with or trade with, they are immovable, typically real estate, investment portfolios. A yacht is movable, it's cruising around the world. And I think there's a lack of understanding with these types of clients when they are so used to getting what they want. They say, I want this, I want it today, they get it. Whereas with a yacht, you can't just say, well, we're in the Med and tomorrow we're going there and then we're going here, because you need to plan that. You need to have all of the fiscal compliance and the various elements in place to be able to facilitate that. So I think it's more about educating the client and being able to manage their expectations. Because again, as I say, these clients, they're so used to getting what they want very quickly, and it's a big frustration when they buy this yacht and then they can't do what they want with it.
I think it's also just to add, people are obviously successful in the businesses that they make, and then they purchase the vessel as a toy, for want of a terminology, but effectively what they're buying is a floating business. And it's kind of getting the understanding around that. So understanding that every single month there's going to be certain costs that they have to adhere to. That I think that education piece is obviously extremely important at the purchase price, because it's all fun and games until you get the invoice each month, and it's making those owners aware of that.
I think just while we just stick briefly a bit longer with the sort of the one-off purchase element, and do we have any bankers in the room who are willing to put their hands up and answer a question for me? Genuine query. That's a shame. I'll probably skip that then. Disposals. This was touched on again on the broker panel recently. Vince, we just talked about, when you're starting the relationship with a client, you're talking about their build or their purchase and how they're going to structure that and fund that. How much do they care at that point? They're excited for to buy their toy. Are they asking you? Are you telling them? What's the discussion around disposal of the assets?
Yeah, my experience is they rarely raise that when they're buying it. They're in the moment, they're excited, they're buying this toy, they're going to do what they want with it. But when I'm having the conversations with my clients, I'm always thinking of the long term. I'm thinking, what's your exit strategy? What do you plan to do? Now, more often than not, we'll all be familiar, a client will take delivery of a yacht, and then within 3 to 6 months, he wants a bigger one, 10 meters bigger. it's just the nature of the game. Now, if we haven't advised him of the exit strategy or the possible strategy for exit, we could find ourselves in an embarrassing situation. So again, when I'm interacting with clients, I would always explain to them, this is day one, this is today, and this will be day 700, 7,000 or whatever. And you need to really build the relationship with the clients. All of the brokers in the room will know how important that client relationship is. And I think when we're structuring for the clients, it's equally as important to have that relationship and have honest conversations. And again, going back to what you were saying before, Dom, I think for most, certainly first-time yacht owners, it's a baptism by fire. They come in, stars in their eyes, they're going to have this new toy, and then suddenly they go, oh my God, what is this? And so it's really about educating them and holding their hand through the entire process.
No, I agree, and it again comes back to the point that the brokers were making earlier. There's the more good guys and the less good guys in the industry, and I think we're all desperate for all owners, new owners in particular, to get in front of a good guy from the start and get some good advice. So we sort of move on to one of the other sort of larger, not quite one-off transactions, but we're talking about refit, periodic large outgoings. Mark, do you want to sort of take us through some of the financial and other considerations for owners and their reps when they're planning for, thinking about taking on a major refit?
Yeah, I think from a refit point of view, you're probably looking at kind of de-risking the refit. Obviously, they can go for quite some months. Let's say there's a currency at play, for example. Over 6 months to a year, you can see market movements. So it's looking, having kind of a payment provider, foreign exchange provider, bank that is regulated to deal with the risk, but also applying that risk in a structured method that would effectively make the owner understand the risk and enable kind of, the payment schedule as well to run according to plan.
Thanks. And I think looking at the time, we'll move forward now to operations. So Frank, you are still awake at the end, I think. Can you take us through some of the challenges when you're setting up a yacht for management, new client or repeat client, and the challenge you face when you're looking at management?
Well, first of all, it's all about the budgets. So it should not come as a surprise if the sales broker did our job properly and talked to us quite often. We work together and we tell them what the operational costs are. And then when he buys the boat, he's going to be exactly telling us where he wants to go, what he wants to do. Then we sit down with the captain and we make a budget for the year. And it's the same with regards to refits. If it is a small refit, it's quite often that the crew is managing it. But if it is a larger refit, we make sure that we write the specification. We make sure that we agree the repair contracts with the shipyard, and there's also a payment plan on how much. So the client should know in advance of what he's going to pay and when it's going to be paid. And some of these payments are very, very substantial, so they need to know in advance of to make sure that the cash flow is there to do it. So this is what we do. And then on the practical side of the operations side of paying invoices, the most important thing is that there is a transparency of the accounting process. So our captains and also the owners team have access to our accounting system. They can see what is in the bank account of the operational bank accounts for the yacht. They can see and they can interrogate the system of invoices, which invoices are getting paid, and where it is. And that works fine. So the only thing is that at the moment, for example, Mark is providing a solution. At the moment, there are different systems for payment systems. So you have a bank who is linked to accounting software, and then you have a credit card system, so we're linked to the accounting system. And then there's still a cash one, and now you're talking about 4 or 5 different platforms. And as a manager, that is an issue, because what we are selling is time and expertise. So it would be better if we can get a platform where we can combine a couple of these software platforms in one, because that is less work for our accountants.
I think on that, it's worth, it's not a one-size-fits-all model for this industry. Obviously, there's so much choice. You've got a yacht manager who wants to work in a certain way, or a captain who wants to work in a certain way, and providing choice is, I think, key when it comes to the right financial partner you're going to use. Some people like certain features, other people like others, and it's just important in the industry to make sure that that choice is still available to crew, to managers. As we know, vessels can obviously change hands, so as much as, let's say, for now it might not be the right platform for someone, in the future it could be, for example. And the word's been used quite a lot previously, but reputation, I think, is adamantly important, especially for tech firms like ourselves. You have a great tech product, but it's the service behind and the reputation that I think is almost as important as the platform.
We've sort of segued quite nicely onto what was going to be my next question for Frank. You've been managing yachts for 20 odd years, I think. You've been running JMS for 10. What's changed in those 20 years? The life of a yacht manager sounds like a headache to me. I don't think it would be the job for me. What was it like 20 years ago? How have things changed between then and now?
I think, originally, when we did the accounts for the boats, the captain had to fill in a spreadsheet, which we then could upload into our accounting program, and we had a big envelope with all the receipts, and then somebody in the office had to sort it all out. Now, everybody is working with online platforms. I use it myself. I use my card. I open the app, I'll select which category is on, where it's spent on, and whatever, and that's all now automated. So that's, it's much easier. It's easier for the crew. So that's for us. It's very important that the crew understands, and you make it easy for the crew, because then they do it. We were forever 20 years ago. We were forever chasing captains to do their accounts, and now it is almost done as a press on the button. So that's much better now.
I think we use this opportunity quickly, and apologies everyone, there's going to be a slight advertorial, but I know Mark was sort of meant to have a couple of minutes before we started, but I think it's a nice chance to hear what products like Centtrip, and I know there's others in the room and in the market, but maybe not purely Centtrip. What do these products bring? What capabilities they have that benefit yacht operations today?
I think, as Frank mentioned, kind of ease of use. A captain's employed to manage a vessel and to steer it effectively amongst other kind of jobs, but spending time collating receipts or approval shouldn't be kind of a time-consuming task. So companies like Centtrip and other fintechs within the industry, I think, just bring the ease of use to it. I mean, we've been now working 12 years. When we first started, it was very much a focus just on APA cards, kind of high balance cards, and that was it. And as the industry develops, tech obviously has to develop. It's not something you can rush, because it's effectively understanding the use case and building accordingly for it. So we started in charter, then went to management, kind of then to payroll, and lastly to sale and purchase. So for fintechs, it's understanding the headaches and providing an easy-to-use solution to them.
Great. Well, I think we will move on and sort of touch on the risk elements of transactions in modern yachting. So looking at the AML side of things, cybercrime, which again Hugo touched on, well, more than touched on, talked to us about before. So without drifting too much into other topics, I think it's a really important one to bring up, because particularly, again, the brokers in the room, again, the brokers that are in the room probably do know this, but a lot of the brokers that aren't in the room might not, how they are, certainly in the UK now, part of our money laundering regulations. It's been a bit of a journey, I think, since 2022, educating some of our colleagues on that and what it really means to comply with the MLR and how little some of them were doing to do so. But most people in this room are probably one way or another regulated under the money laundering regs, whether you're a broker, whether you're a fiduciary, a lawyer, or whoever you are. So I think we do need to sort of just touch on that. So actually back to you, Mark. What are the main regulatory pitfalls and risk factors, and how are you protecting clients' interests?
I think for us, obviously, compliance is key. We're FCA regulated. We've got stringent kind of controls that we have to adhere to. It's kind of the benefit you get with a specialized fintech is kind of understanding the compliance, understanding the structures, understanding why money flows in a certain way. You know, a BVI structure is set up for a certain reason, a Cayman structure is set up for a certain reason, whereas kind of compliance in, you know, big corporations, kind of other big fintechs, so to speak, they see it and it raises alarm bells. So I think it's understanding the compliance and the industry is kind of key to put the two and two together.
And I think probably one of the biggest challenges is, you know, we all know how international an industry this is. And we certainly see, you know, from clients from one jurisdiction to another, typically US clients, you ask them for KYC, you might get sacked. Other clients are a lot better at it, understand it, appreciate the importance of it. Vincent, in terms of sort of setting up client structures, setting up, you know, their yachting ventures, what steps can be taken at the outset to manage some of these sort of financial risks?
Yeah, I think you hit a key point there, Dom, in the difference in culture, particularly when you're dealing with international clients. You know, I can speak to a client from the UK, tell him I need a copy of a utility bill, for example, something so simple. He's happy to give it to me, or she's happy to give it to me. If I ask a client from another jurisdiction for evidence of their home address, it'll be, what do you want my home address for? No, you're not having that. And it's almost culturally unacceptable to the client. And so depending on who it is that I'm working with, the conversation might differ slightly. You know, I think there's also a slight, or maybe less today than a few years ago, but there's a slight disjoint between the brokerage industry and those more regulated industries like banking, financial services, corporate services. You know, the latter have all been regulated for many years, particularly in the majority of jurisdictions. You know, so it goes without saying that if I set up a trust, a partnership, a foundation company, or whatever for a client, I'm not going to do it until I've got the KYC. Whereas a yacht transaction could go through with a minimal amount of KYC. You know, I'm seeing a shift in that over the last 3 or 4 years. But there's still a resistance with certain brokers and certain individuals. You know, they don't want to be going to a client that they've been working with for several years and say, the goalposts have moved, I now need a full pack of KYC from you, because some of them, not all, if you have a very strong relationship with your client, it shouldn't be an issue. But for many of the brokers, they know that their clients have 30 other brokers trying to pitch them every month to make them switch over and work with them. And so it's a very delicate situation to manage, I think, that kind of relationship. But I guess the short answer to your question would be, it's all about preparation, anticipation. You know you're going to be dealing with a client, well, not anymore, but a Russian client. You're going to approach them differently to an American client or a British client, and it's just understanding how you need to pitch that, how you need to present it.
I think it's also worth mentioning, obviously, with financial technology firms, you've got providers, banking providers, who'll give RFIs that you have to respond to. So having that compliance and having that KYC on file is actually hugely vital, because at the end of the day, we're all working for the vessel to win effectively. So as much as it is, I'd say, legwork at the beginning, the long-term reward, I think, is there, because what you don't want is to set up an account and everything's great and it's set up in 2 days and it looks snazzy and you think it's great, and then you try and send a payment or something and then it gets held. It's the reputation's at risk. Again, it's the relationships, reputations of every single person involved. So for us, it's obviously hugely important, but it does just lead to a longer relationship.
Yeah, I think that's something absolutely critical. It is all about the relationship. And again, I found over the years, when you're dealing with certain institutions or service providers, they have no flexibility. Everything is a tick box exercise. You know, they have this schedule. It's like tick, tick, tick. Can't tick that. Everything stops, and it's so frustrating. You know, whereas if you have the relationship and you can pick the phone up and say, hey, Dom, I know you haven't got that, but can we move forward with everything else? I'm working on it. And if you've got that agility, the whole transaction goes much more smoothly, the clients aren't affected, and it just makes the process much easier. So for me, you know, literally everything we do in this industry is about relationships and trust.
Well, if you want us to do your accounts and your management, you pass the KYC, and otherwise we don't do it. That's a short answer.
And I think what we've certainly seen, we learned a lot in 2022 about compliance, KYC, money laundering, and obviously sanctions was a massive topic. And I think we really saw a knee jerk from a lot of operators in the industry who went, right, we just don't touch this if it smells wrong. I think we're starting to come back into a slightly more nuanced area when it comes to KYC, that yes, there's still the regulations, but you know, I think there's a bit more scope for conversations to get comfortable, and if that's not available, maybe this other document is available. So hopefully we're getting to a bit more of a pragmatic sort of time in that. So we've done our KYC, we've onboarded, we're all happy. You're not immune from cybercrime, and Frank, I'm particularly interested to hear from you. You know, we're all, I think, again, in the last 5-10 years, got a bit more general knowledge and understanding about the risks of you know, phishing scams and invoice interception, things like that. Is it something you're seeing regularly in your fleet, or is it, you know, is it something that's...
Yeah, we are absolutely paranoid about those scams, and you know, quite a while ago we were also the victim of an invoice scam, and we are absolutely paranoid. We have very, very strict procedures on it, and we also have, you know, it is also escalated. So if we transfer large amounts of money, then more senior people need to double check it themselves.
I think it's always an industry that's, you know, it's high volume. So for a fraudster or a criminal, they're always going to go after the yachting sector, but it's making sure you've got the right systems in place to manage that. So that comes from the yacht management point of view, the internal controls, and from your financial provider as well, making sure that you're using the correct financial provider, doing your research. You know, there's more and more companies that can come to the industry that can move money from A to B. And if it was kind of that easy, anyone would do it. But it's making sure that you're with the right provider who understands the industry and kind of has that unique understanding of, or the unique controls that you need to have in order to implement the transactions that we're all kind of used to.
Yeah, it's not only that, because usually the scam, you know, it's usually one of the suppliers who get hacked and who is doing the attempt, and we have quite regularly attempts on that. We found it quite regularly, yes.
I think it's also the crew as well. As much as the managers can have the control and the financial provider, it's the education of the crew as well, because you're dealing obviously with someone else's money constantly, so it's making sure that you're on top of that, checking the balances, checking the receipts, checking the cards. You know, if there's notifications that you can receive for transactions, turn them on. You know, it might be more emails, but it just means as soon as fraud will always be there. And it's basically just about stopping it as soon as possible.
And looking at the time, we'll move on. There was a few other bits on that, but I think we'll move on to our sort of final substantive topic, which is managing clients' experience, their expectations. And actually, I think quite a pertinent example I've got from a recent experience with a client. I think luckily no one in the room was involved with this client, so I'm not going to embarrass anyone. But more experienced owner, he's had yachts for years, his father had yachts. Always, you know, used his own credit card. Captain had a copy of his own credit card, spent stuff, sent him the receipts. You know, the old school kind of way of doing it. New yacht, we thought, right, new management. It wasn't Centtrip, but another similar system. And we thought, what a brilliant setup. This client is going to find it easier. His administrators are going to find it a lot easier to manage the operation. And it blew up because this client was an older gentleman. He didn't like the fact things had been taken out of his control. I don't even know what this product is. What is this card I now have? You know, who's got my money? I don't, you know. First day he gets on the boat, I'm the captain, this is my boat. You know, it was one of those characters. Now, all the things we're talking about, to an extent, take a lot of the control of the finances and the operation away from our owners. How do we manage that conversation? How do we ensure that owners are comfortable and appreciate the fact that maybe some of these things are no longer under their control? Any of you?
For me, I think it just comes down to reputation in the industry, who you work with, how long you've been working. Well, not necessarily how long you've been working with, but if people are going to put forward a provider, it's obviously, it comes from substance. It comes from their experience. Every touch point with the provider, it comes from that. So, as much as people do have to relinquish control, it's understanding that then focus can be kind of placed elsewhere. Therefore, having the owner have a more enjoyable time on board his vessel.
Yeah, I think I'd add to that as well. Say, I think also I've got a couple of live examples on my time's running away. A couple of live examples of this where I have slightly older yacht owners, and we've set up bank accounts, and they don't like the fact that a director, a professional regulated director, is signing off on payments that they view as being their money. Yes, it's ultimately their money, but it's in a structure, and the directors have to transact. Now, again, many service providers will say, well, that's the way it is. If you don't like it, go. But as a solution, what I've done with these couple of clients that I have this situation with is I've actually appointed them as board observers, so they partake in board meetings. It's a non-executive role, so they're not managing, controlling the company, potentially bringing it into another country's tax jurisdiction, but they're able to give their views in those board meetings. Now, they've reached the point 12 months on where they don't bother attending because they're now comfortable with the situation. I have another client who was quite upset by this, and so what we did is we gave him visibility over the bank account, and we've given him authority to release payments with one of the directors. Now, he's completely happy with that, and it's working really well. So again, I think it goes back to what I was saying earlier about the relationship, building the relationships, having the agility and the willing to not just tick a box. Yes, we can't move forward, doesn't tick the box, be a bit more flexible.
Well, if an owner is concerned of that, then somebody from the family office can be looped into the approval process of any invoice, or we can even set a limit. So anything over 5, 10, 20,000 euros needs to be approved by somebody in the family office. So.
And Frank, in your experience, when you're again setting up, a management client, are you saying to them, we use this really great system and we think you should use it, or actually our client saying to you, what systems do you have, or do you still get the clients who want to be doing this themselves and paying for everything themselves? What's a typical or an example of a typical conversation for you?
There are some clients who want to do the finances themselves, and we do everything else. But when we're asked to be the finances, to do the financial management of the boat, we have different options. So and we show them how it works, and different platforms, and they can choose what they want. And quite often, it's more driven by the operational side on board. It's the captains and the crew and the pursers who decide what platform is most easiest for them.
Well, I think we're sort of getting towards question time, so I think we'll move to sort of the final point for each of you, which was, in fact, I don't think it was on our official title, but our sort of strap line was expert strategies for modern yacht transactions. So if each of our panelists could offer up a sort of piece of expert insight or on any of the topics, or one we haven't touched on in this talk relating to yachting transactions.
I'll go. For me, it's research into the right provider, making sure you're happy with them, making sure you've done kind of the relevant checks, asking for referrals. Obviously, like we kind of keep on going on about, reputation of providers in the industry is paramount to that. So for me, it's speaking, whether you're working with a broker, asking the broker for their advice. If someone's new to purchasing a vessel, they're not going to know the same amount of companies that the broker knows, for example. So yeah, reputation and referrals to me is one of the most important things for it.
Yeah, I'd agree completely with that. I think it's all about surrounding yourself or surrounding your client with the right people. You know, when you're working with the right people, with professionals, people who know what they're doing, transactions are smooth. You know, the old expression, you pay peanuts, you get monkeys. You know, don't go for a cheaper option. Surround yourself with professionals.
Frank? You can answer this question then. How can owners prevent cost overruns on refit?
Hire us.
And after they've done that, what are you going to do to help prevent overruns on refit?
Well, it shouldn't really come as a surprise because you know, there is a budget made for a refit, and there's an agreement, and there's a price. If you open up something which you know, every refit has unexpected. You open something up, it is broken, it needs to be replaced, there's an extra cost. But then there will be a change order. So before you sign the change order, you need to inform the owner's team and ask for approval. You know, and quite often they don't have a choice because if it is not, if a steel plate in the bottom needs to be replaced, you know, you're in the shipyard. It's the only way to do it over there. There's no alternative for it. But you need to have the approval from the owners for it before you go ahead. You can't just first do it and then ask for the money later.
I think I'll use it as a chance for a shameless lawyer plug. Have a well-drafted refit agreement as well. We can't fix everything, but we can help. So, I think if there's not any other questions, or if there was anyone who had some nice horror stories, anything sort of cybercrimey, I think it's actually useful to share them, but you might not want to. But I was hoping someone might have a really good bit of experience to share with the floor, but if not, and if there's no more questions, I think we'll hand back over and go for tea, I think.